Hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday Night Conscious Community class with me, Matthew Brownstein, founder and lead instructor at the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy. We've been doing these classes now since about 2012. Recently started them again with YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And then, of course, a lot of viewers watching these as recordings now. So tonight, we're diving right into NLP and hypnotherapy. For a lot of you, I'm going to have to start with what is NLP, what is hypnotherapy. But those of you who follow the deeper teachings that I like to offer, understand that I always want to go deeper. I want to offer you a lot of value that when you're spending some time with me, that you walk away ideally feeling more at peace, more empowered, more optimistic about your future, and everything else that's good. So tonight, we'll definitely do at least one meditation inspired by NLP. I'll offer a lot of free resources so you can dive deeper into a lot of this type of stuff without having to spend any money and just kind of let you know what's going on. So this image actually is kind of been doing some really nice outdoorsy promotional stuff. Welcome everybody who's joined in. So yeah, a lot of fun outdoor stuff. So I hope you've seen the little promo videos to promote these classes. But anyway, for those of you who want to dive in, we are the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy. That's the logo on the left. We also founded the Interpersonal NLP Society, which is our own thing. Earlier in our history, we were paired up with other hypnotherapy and NLP associations. And the truth is the standards just didn't meet our standards over the years. And I had to very politely part ways with some leaders in the field to say, you know, we're going to do our own thing. So it is our own thing. Now, NLP isn't our own thing, and I'll start because it was founded by others. Yet I've been doing it for 25 years now. I do consider myself a master practitioner and trainer. I do trainings in basic and master level NLP. And we've synthesized it beautifully with the work that we do here. The logo on the right is the International Association of Interpersonal Hypnotherapists. That's our hypnotherapy credentialing body because, again, we had very high standards of what we want this profession to be, and we didn't know anybody else who had those standards, so we did our own thing there. Same with the Interpersonal NLP Society. You now get certifications through us. Our school is licensed by the Department of Education, so everything we do is backed by the DOE, and we offer the interpersonal hypnotherapy. The interpersonal up here right now is CEU courses, because your primary diplomas, state licensed diplomas you get through the school, come from the Department of Education themselves. So most of our graduates who are practicing hypnotherapists would practice under that occupational title, and then they would use NLP as a supplement to what they're doing. It's a very powerful supplement, and if you're not NLP trained, and if you've gone through our school, or you're going through our school, we have a new class starting tomorrow, so welcome to all you new guys and gals, new peoples. So when you're going through our training in hypnotherapy, out of the 500 plus hours, you get about 15 hours of NLP. That's enough to be dangerous, right? Or you can't be dangerous with this, that's a joke, but it's enough to say you don't know very much. You might have some sense of NLP, but until you've gone through complete training, and our trainings are now 50 hours for basic training and 50 hours for master level training. Honestly, you shouldn't call yourself a master out of about 100 hours of training. However, that's the standard in the industry. And while I'd rather call it advanced NLP, you got to consider the market as well. Somebody would rather be a master than just advanced. But really, you can call yourself a master when you've done something for over 10 years. I've done it for 25, and I'm still not comfortable with the titles. But again, they're the ones used in NLP. Next, so what is hypnotherapy? Just in case some of you who are here really have no clue. What I wrote on the screen, but then I'll elaborate. It's a little small there. Didn't expect the slide to look that way. It says, utilizing the hypnotic state with powerful transformational modalities to create positive change. I don't know why the font turned out that way, but that was meant to be that way because it's hypnotic for you. Confusing for you. All right, so we're utilizing the hypnotic state when we're doing hypnotherapy. We don't consider ourselves psychologists or psychotherapists. We are facilitators that help people who are generally doing well to do even better. When you're dealing with severe mental illness, there might be some people trained in hypnotherapy who deal with that, but generally hypnotherapists help the able to become more able. my dearest mentor, Mr. Gil Boyne, he called hypnotherapy a therapy for the people, right? And in A Course in Miracles, the question is asked, is psychotherapy a profession? And the answer is, strictly speaking, no. Because how could something that everyone is involved with be a separate profession? So that's a little bit of a segue to NLP because of the incredible value of knowing NLP. It will help your hypnotherapy practice, but I guarantee you it will help in the long run. And tell you why I say that. It'll help your interpersonal relationships for sure. I say in the long run because you become acutely aware of people's language patterns. Right? For instance, here's just a little hint about how some of the NLP language patterns could work. Because remember, so NLP, what does it mean? Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So the linguistic part clearly, very precisely looks at language patterns. So let's say your spouse says to you, honey, you're wonderful, but after the word but, or the moment you say the word but, everything you said before is essentially negated. Now, there are lots of other patterns that people fall into. Like if you've ever been talking to somebody and you make your point and you know you have a valid point and they interrupt you. First of all, they interrupt you. That's a rapport breaker, as we call it in NLP and in hypnotherapy, right? Interrupting a client or your spouse can be a rapport breaker. So again, I want you to walk away learning something tonight that's really valuable. But realize when you start noticing these patterns, it might create a little friction for a while. So the pattern I was just saying is not only can someone interrupt you, what if they interrupt you and say no, and then they go talk about what they want to say? What happens, I've experienced that recently, what happens to the listener when what happens to the speaker when the listener interrupts you, says no, and then starts talking? Everything you said was negated. What happens to your emotional sense of self when that happens? So now, why would this benefit your relationships? Well, you can learn not to do that kind of stuff. But also, it can challenge your relationships because you're going to notice it more acutely than ever before. Another example of an NLP language pattern, even though we're jumping ahead, but NLP kind of is the topic tonight. Well, let's not go too far. So bear with me. And let me finish what is hypnotherapy. Then we'll get to tons of good NLP and the language patterns and whatnot. So in hypnotherapy, it developed before NLP, first of all. It started with Franz Anton Mesmer with the phenomena of mesmerism or animal magnetism. This idea was that a person could take their own animal magnetic fluid, like a energy, you might call that chi or prana or reiki, or therapeutic touch might believe it's tapping into that there's idea that there's a chi, there's a shakti, there's a power within everybody. And Mesmer and others before him believe you could transfer that to other people. Mesmer actually started doing that using magnets, believing these magnets have this power because they have some kind of power, believing that this power, this invisible force, right, is everywhere, that the planets have a magnetic influence over us. Scientifically, we know that doesn't hold up anymore. And Mesmer at his time was really discredited for his theories. But what he couldn't be discredited for were actually the cures that happened. Maybe they were placebo and psychosomatic. Okay, but people were getting healed. People were falling into trance states. And some of his earlier students were magnetizing trees, right? And then having ropes hanging down from the magnetized tree. People would hold hands and hold the ropes. The magnetic fluid would supposedly move through their bodies, and they would be crying and passing out and having catharsis. Some would laugh, some would cry. Others, nothing would happen at all. But there was a real phenomena going on. They started discovering this idea of somnambulism, or people who appear to the word is a French word for sleepwalker. These people would be in these altered states, walking around, but talking, interacting, supposedly diagnosing illness in a very primitive way. When you read what they were saying, it's like, you have like a ball of hair caught in your large intestine. It was nothing profound that modern medicine would buy into. But again, healings were occurring and altered states were occurring. So for years, but mainstream medicine, psychology just didn't want to hear anything about it. It wasn't until 1864, almost 100 years later, that Dr. James Braid started saying, look, you can utilize this state that we're going to now call hypnosis, not the mesmeric state. It's not mesmerism anymore. Now it's hypnotism. And we can utilize the power of suggestion to get the same results that Mesmer was doing. That made hypnosis much more credible, because now you don't have to believe in some mysterious, unproven, and actually kind of disproven. They did studies on Mesmer, and they're like, all right, this is actually in the history of medicine and science, as I understand it, the first scientific and medical delegation applying scientific method to study paranormal phenomena. Ben Franklin was one of those people. Dr. Joseph Guillotine, the guillotine guy, was one of those. And while studying Mesmer, they concluded he's not healing through any mesmeric fluid. There's no such thing. They really felt by scientific method, they disproved it, right? So it's a big nail in the coffin for Mesmer. Ben Franklin said Mesmer heals through the power of belief, imagination, suggestion, and imitation. We talked about imitation recently in a class. The point is, to segue into Dr. James Braid, he was using the power of suggestion to induce the altered state and to get some therapeutic results. Over time, people like Dr. Sigmund Freud, Dr. Joseph Breuer, and a lot of other famous psychologists and medical doctors were utilizing it. Kind of a present time with us, a Milton Erickson was a very well-known, very effective hypnotherapist, and two men started studying him, John Grinder and Richard Bandler, the founders of NLP. So we'll get into what is NLP, but basically the history of hypnosis happened before NLP, just for some of you who have no clue about any of this. There's a history of mesmerism turning into hypnotism. Now, there are branches of psychology that utilized hypnosis and some that don't. There are other branches that didn't grow in the university setting, and ours is one of those, because the university setting, at least the way it's set up now at most universities, was too limited. So there are other schools, and I'll just mention my lineage comes from the ACHE, the work of Mr. Gil Boyne. Gil founded a style of hypnotherapy that he called transforming therapy. It was a regressive hypnosis style. Now, Sigmund Freud was using regressive hypnosis, but part of why psychoanalysis, which was the trend, like in the 60s or whatnot, in the 70s, it's lost popular favor. Most modern psychotherapists do not do Freudian analysis. What happened, though, in Freud's early days is that he was pioneering his work using the hypnotic state. But there's a few reasons, I think about 3 significant ones, why he just decided, I'm not going to use this for my style of psychotherapy. In case you're interested, those reasons, as I understand them, and I could be slightly wrong because everybody has a different view of history and what you remember from history books. What I remember of that story is that Freud didn't have good rapport. He couldn't get the same results that a lot of us get. You have this idea of a psychoanalytic patient who's sitting facing away, right? Y'all can picture what that is. Y'all can picture the patient sitting not facing the therapist. Freud supposed they had really bad breath and a cocaine problem from rubbing cocaine on his gums. So some people theorize that's why you don't face the practitioner in psychoanalysis, because Freud actually didn't want to. But either way, one theory about why he wasn't good with hypnotherapy or hypnosis is he didn't get good rapport. He also felt that hypnotic suggestion just didn't last, that you give a suggestion for you're no longer suffering. At the time, they used the word hysteria, like you're no longer suffering from hysteria. They would give suggestions, maybe properly worded. That wasn't properly worded. But if you give really good suggestions, people would still fall into these having their issues. So he concluded this isn't good enough, but he did explore regression therapy. He would regress people to the cause of their problems. And he discovered, which a lot of us in the field have, that a lot of women, specifically, especially, had been sexually abused. A lot of this hysteria they were talking about, hysteria like hysterectomy related to diseases of the uterus, these, quote, hysterical women were actually sexually abused, were suppressing all of that emotion. It was physiologically, it was psychosomatically affecting their uterus, right? You store all of that hatred and rage and sadness and fear and all that negativity that abuse like that can bring. And it's going to affect your body, and you might be diagnosed at the time as hysterical. Nobody wanted to hear about Freud's findings that these women, his patients, were sexually abused. His colleagues didn't want to hear it. And, you know, I've been in the field now for 25 years. If I had to guess, I would say about 70% of female clients, not the female population. and I could be wrong about this number, it's a guess, about 70% of female clients who have, issues, not the average woman, but somebody who comes in with problems, I would guess about 70% of those have been sexually abused. You have to have really good training in this career to be able to even consider touching that. And honestly, some people in our profession, no names or other trainings mentioned, shouldn't be going even near that. But when you start doing hypnotic regression, you uncover memories from childhood. Freud basically couldn't go any further with that because of the culture of his time. So those are the three major reasons why hypnotherapy didn't get into mainstream psychotherapy. It was largely because of Sigmund Freud, but it never totally went away. I can't go through the whole history. I'll just say in the university side, it was not that strong. Now it's getting a bit more headway. In the non-therapeutic side, the schools that are happening outside of, and not even non-therapeutic, because within the law, we can practice therapeutic hypnosis as well with the proper training, credentials, and knowing how to work within the law. So it does require specialized training, but non-therapeutic conditions essentially are going to be very basic: smoking, weight loss, raising self-esteem. Therapeutic would be anything dealing with medical, dental, or mental health. So again, you want specialized training and follow the laws about that stuff and have the right credentials. But there's the branch that's outside of the university setting that's not licensed. And not that we're against university settings, because as our school is growing, and we're growing in that direction, honestly, without saying too much right now. So there's nothing wrong with that. But when you have to leave out spirituality, which they tend to do in university professions, you miss a lot. And when you're not willing to go through what the hypnotherapists go through. So for instance, when you graduate and you become a medical doctor, you've got about 7 minutes with the patient. A lot of psychotherapy sessions might be an hour. In hypnotherapy, our sessions are usually 2 hours long, right? So imagine a doctor who might get trained as a hypnotherapist, and we have graduates who are, right? But what are you going to do in 7 minutes if that's as much time as you give a patient? We have to give 2 hours. So it's a very different type of profession. Now, so hypnotherapy, essentially, what is hypnotherapy? We're using the altered state known as hypnosis, which Mesmer and others were putting people into. But with hypnotherapy, at least the way we do it, we are utilizing regressive hypnosis. We are taking people back to the cause of their problems. It's not all hypnotherapy is, but we're utilizing powerful transformational modalities while someone's in the altered state. We can put new information in, right? That's like direct suggestion, hypnotic programming, and there's fancier ways to do it. But essentially, you're programming a person. Hence, listen to the title tonight, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Right? Both are using the same idea of programming. So hypnotherapists can program things in like a hypnotist could. But a hypnotherapist, at least the way we define it, is much better trained to deal with the underlying issues that cause problems. Because my lineage is through Gil Boyne and his style of transforming therapy, there is a strong regressive hypnosis component. By the way, if you have questions tonight, save them for the end, but have them typed out already. So when you cut and paste them into the chat pod, then they can come in really quickly. So we'll definitely do a question answer after a meditation tonight. All right, so I hope some of you are enjoying the history of hypnosis and whatnot, especially if you're just starting school with us tomorrow. Okay, so Gil Boyne, transforming therapy, regressing to root cause. Gil Boyne studied with Fritz Perls, as I understand it. I never asked him enough about that history, but while he was alive, and I was getting to know him and more about him and his long legislative work and all the things that I was working with him on, including our school becoming the first state licensed school in Florida, was largely because of Gil. As I understand it, he studied with Fritz Perls. Perls is a Gestalt therapist. He's the founder of Gestalt therapy. And simply stated, a Gestalt, well, the word itself, a Gestalt, is that which is whole. When you're working with a client, you're always, for the most part, working with a split mind. I'm not saying dissociative identity split, just part of me hates the inner child hates the mom, and the mom hates the child, right? And you get into a regression, and you have an inner child and an inner parent, and they're fighting it out. So we call that in analytical hypnotherapy a parent-child conflict. It's pretty simple, and it's actually, it's not actually that simple. It's extremely complex what's going on in there, but that parent-child conflict is essentially the root of all of our problems. Hold that thought, because then you'll understand what is interpersonal hypnotherapy better. Because when you get to the root cause of a person's problem, Gil Boyne found there's essentially a memory, and not only Gil, right, all the way back to Freud and before Freud, they realized there are memories in the subconscious mind with negative beliefs and emotions causing problems, including psychosomatic illness, right? So why not just get to the root cause and solve it? Fritz Perls, so that's a little bit about Gestalt, but Fritz Perls is one of the people that Richard Bandler and John Grinder studied while they were formulating and kind of designing, figuring out NLP. So I mentioned two names that the founders of NLP studied that are part of our history, Milton Erickson and Fritz Perls. Virginia Satir is another, and Alfred Korzybski is another, but they did study other great minds as well. What happened when we get to NLP is they started thinking about how can we model human excellence. If someone else can do something really well, let's learn what they're doing and then do it, right? And so what you find in hypnotherapy is a very solid profession, still evolving and finding its own way in this world. But we've got a good series of techniques. And in our school now, highly refined and advanced techniques with interpersonal hypnotherapy that are just a very powerful system. Because NLP essentially grew out of this same basic lineage, but looked at it like from an external point of view, saying, okay, well, here's Erickson and the hypnotherapy lineage. Well, what is he doing that makes him so good? And then let's create ways of being, techniques essentially, that we can learn to do what people like Erickson are doing. So they develop what's called the Milton Model. And essentially it's saying, what is he doing when he's doing hypnotherapy? The truth is, Erickson was doing classical hypnotherapy. He learned classical hypnotherapy, but he was so brilliant, he could twist around language patterns. And, I do this now too, when you've been in the field for 25 years, you get the basics inside and out. And honestly, the basics are more important than sometimes advanced patterns, because if you get really good at the basics, you realize the advanced patterns came out of the basics. Erickson, being so advanced, was doing the basic patterns extremely well. And that's where NLP is such a great way to look back with like an outside observer lens at anything, not just hypnotherapy. But because they looked at hypnotherapy, it complements it so well. But NLP can be used in any setting: interpersonal relationships, sales, corporate trainings, working in hospitals, and like anywhere, like anything, especially something like sales, where people are interacting with other people. Hypnotherapy is, NLP is very powerful. In fact, if you ever want to bring this kind of work into corporations, NLP fits in better. But NLP is not as well known. If somebody goes to the quote phone book back in the day, when I was in private practice as a youngster, people go to the phone book, but they didn't go to the phone book for neuro-linguistic programming. And maybe some people will get on Google and search for that now. However, most people who want to stop smoking using this kind of work are going to go to a hypnotherapist, not to a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. So because we offer NLP training, it proves to be a really beautiful adjunct to a hypnotherapy practice. The studies, if you go to Wikipedia, at least last time I did, and could have been updated and maybe for the better, but the studies that were on, but either way, there were studies that were done on NLP as a standalone therapy. And the general conclusion has been no, right? Like most psychotherapists don't come out of a university and say, I'm doing only NLP. The general conclusion has been, at least I'll speak for myself, it is an amazing adjunct to anything you do. Does it stand alone as an occupational title that you wanted to say, I'm a neuro-linguistic programming person? Some people have done it. Tony Robbins is a big NLP person. But if he was not Tony Robbins, you probably wouldn't know him. So as a career, hypnotherapy seems to be a more solid path, where like we have graduates now who are definitely in the healthy six-figure income bracket. NLP, that might be harder to get there. But combining both, it gives you that much more skill set. So hypnotherapy, we're using hypnosis. And in the more advanced styles, we're definitely doing work with the subconscious mind. We're not claiming to be psychotherapists, but of course we're working with the mind, but everybody works with the mind, right? You go to a life coach or even an acupuncturist or a massage therapist, they're going to talk to you about how you feel, right? Everybody talks about the mind. The main difference is, are you working with medical, dental, or mental health conditions? If you're not trained to work on schizophrenia, you shouldn't be working on schizophrenia. But can you help a client, a neighbor, a friend, or an actual paying professional client? Can you help them to raise their self-esteem and be more successful in life? Absolutely, perfectly legal. If you work on medical conditions in hypnotherapy, essentially you just get a referral from a physician or a mental health provider, the appropriate person, but we train you in that as we go into the law. Anyway, that's an overview of hypnotherapy and some history. So what is NLP? Here I have the slide. A way of thinking that leaves behind a trail of techniques by Richard Bandler. I believe he's the one who said that, and I don't think I put quotes around it because that's kind of a paraphrase, but essentially that's the quote, the best that I remember it. A way of thinking that leaves behind a trail of techniques. So what is that? It's essentially saying, okay, here's Milton Erickson or someone, doesn't matter who. But in the example, Milton Erickson is a great hypnotherapist. Look at what he's doing. He looks brilliant. He sounds brilliant. He had polio and he's quite old in the videos that I've seen of him, so he's actually quite boring. It's very slow. It'll put you to hypnosis and some sleepy state just because you're listening to someone who's old and had like bad polio through his life. But the brain, like even though he was lying there paralyzed as a child watching his family and he couldn't even move his body with polio, his brilliant mind was looking at human behavior. And then as he went through medical and therapeutic studies, he started formulating his own way of being. Now, we're not an Ericksonian school. I don't personally favor the style, but if you go to our school, you'll see I have a very robust Ericksonian collection. So I've studied it, not as intense as you could, because I realized this is not the style of hypnotherapy I personally like. But anyway, as one person that the NLP founder studied, Erickson became a wonderful model for how he's doing what he's doing. But to define NLP, part of it, it's very hard to define actually, is you have a way of thinking that looks at others and then works to model, that's the essential word here, NLP works to model the excellence in others, but not their behaviors per se, right? So if you watch me, for instance, I pick me because I'm right here. When you say, hey, Matthew speaks fluidly, right? Words just keep flowing out of his mouth. I would like to be able to speak that way too without pre-planned notes or anything. Right? When I first saw a teacher talking without notes, I was like, how is that happening? So it wouldn't just be try to duplicate what I'm doing, like nod your head and move your hand every so often, right? And move your mouth, right? You have to know what's happening inside of someone who's doing something well so that you can do it as well. So the more you study a role model, you can learn to take on the qualities the role model has. That's part of what NLP is, but it's a lot more. So what is it by definition? Neuro refers to what we call the first mental map. It's when you have information coming in through your senses, your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, right? Sense of touch. And largely NLP talks about visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, right? We can see the world, we can hear the world, we can feel the world. Of course, we can taste and smell the world too. But the primary representational systems, as they're called, are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So neuro refers to the information that comes in and the first mental map. So I would suggest that animals have that level of processing, right? Your dog, your cat, they're in there. My grandma Lil, she looked at her golden retriever one day and she's like, there's a person in there. This is so cute, this Jewish grandmother lady saying, there's a person in there. She was kind of, I believe she was referring to like, hey, there's a soul in there. There's a spirit in there. There's consciousness there. The consciousness, which we all have, animals for sure. I mean, I think most people here would believe that. Animals, well, or anybody who has consciousness, sentient beings essentially, and who have sense organs are taking in information from the outside. But you don't perceive, you don't experience the outside world. You actually, like think about your vision. Images or light essentially comes into your eyes. It's flipped over in your eyeball, and then your brain reflips it back over. And then I would suggest you, as the final recipient of that information, the consciousness, sees what's happening in your mind/brain. You don't actually hear me or see me. You are seeing it in your own mind. Right? Now, that idea is called a phenomenological reality, essentially saying you don't see reality, you see what's in your own head. And that's why everybody sees it a little bit differently, right? We don't see an objective universe. We see it from our own perspective. Like if I say to you, oh, you know Mary? Tell me about Mary. And you might say, well, Mary's really smart. She's very intellectual. She's very rational. I'm like, well, Mary's actually very warm-hearted and very loving and very kind. She's not that in her head, right? You might be seeing it through your filter. I'm seeing it through mine. But that leads to the linguistic side of what is NLP. So neuro is just the data coming in, and essentially it's raw. It's not really interpreted. The second mental map, the next thing we do with the information that comes in, is we put linguistics to it. We start saying something like rectangular, light shining off of it, a person moving their head up and down. We're like, oh, that's a computer screen, right? If you didn't have the word computer screen, those words in your mind, and you just stared right at the whole screen now, that's neuro. Now, when you start saying, oh, that's Matthew Brownstein. Oh, he's talking about hypnotherapy and NLP. Oh, he's wearing a suit. That is the linguistic map. It's very important at that level to realize people do not experience reality. They experience their neuro-linguistic maps. NLP is the science, if you will, or the series of techniques of technology to change those mental maps. So for instance, if I see I'll be real. I know somebody who really don't like spiders, right? So this person sees a spider and they see the same thing I do. But what does their inner mental map do? The linguistic part could be, that's going to kill me. That thing has fangs. That thing is icky. It's going to crawl on my skin. I'm not going to be able to sleep at night. That's the story that goes on there. I see it and I'm like, oh, let's get a piece of paper and take it outside. Or sometimes we need to get a tissue, but squash them. But ideally, we take them outside. And why is it totally different? Because of the neurolinguistic filters of each person. Now, let's say the person who has the phobia or the intense fear of spiders says, I would like to not have that anymore. Then NLP would say something like this. I want you guys to have takeaways from the class. So here's a takeaway to get to understand somebody. NLP would say something like, teach me how to have your problem. Explain to me your mental map of how you're perceiving the spider. Oh, I see. If I have to put an image right in my face of the spider with big fangs and lots of eyeballs and all the hairy legs and venomous fangs, and then my arm blowing up the size of a balloon. And oh, if I did that in my mind, I would feel really bad around spiders too. And so NLP essentially would say, all right, see what you're doing now, right, through good intake skills, which can enhance your hypnotherapy practice. So how do we combine NLP and hypnotherapy? We utilize the NLP rapport building skills and listening skills and the data gathering skills to get a better sense of our client's mental map. If you're not doing that, you're missing a huge part of the equation, right? Because maybe they weren't traumatized by a spider when they were little. Maybe they just learned to do something in their mind that doesn't benefit them now. So here's the difference between hypnosis and NLP generally. Hypnosis or hypnotherapy specifically is dealing with content. Right? We might go to say, why are you afraid of a spider? Let's go to the root cause of that. There's got to be a root cause of it. NLP actually doesn't care much about that, although it doesn't totally divorce itself from that idea either, honestly. But NLP more generally cares with structure, not content, but structure. Structure is, what are you doing in your mind now that caused your problem now? And if you go through our school's NLP training, you'll see, you go through recordings, 35 hours of recordings, and then 15 hours of actually live practical hours with me done online. We have one, I'll do some screen share with you guys soon. We have a training coming up. But when you're going through, you'll be watching demonstrations of me with those current students. And every single person in that class who came up to me online and had something wrong, I just applied NLP, no hypnotherapy, no inducing trance or anything. And they're all having major, major shifts. So if you get good at NLP skills, you could get somebody who has that fear of spiders or whatever and shift them into a much, let's say, healthier, not to judge, but right, like a more beneficial mindset where you don't have to be scared. It doesn't have to be such an issue for you. The beauty of knowing NLP is you can do it for yourself, right? So if you're like, I think I'm afraid of this fear, then you can go through some NLP techniques in yourself and shift that. Facilitation is great, but the techniques absolutely could work as self-help. The word programming in NLP, right, neuro-linguistic programming, relates to that we are all programmed. We grow up and we develop these mental maps, these linguistic patterns of how to perceive and structure our world. And while people aren't broken in an NLP model, the truth is they could usually be doing far better. They have the abilities. NLP acknowledges if someone else can do something, so can you. But if you don't have the training and the discipline and the techniques, the technologies to change your mind, to learn how to use your brain, as they would say in NLP, then you're really disempowered. So we all have the same potential essentially, but when you tap into NLP, you really can actualize your full potential. Okay, next slide. And then we'll be getting to a meditation and we'll be getting the question and answer. All right, so what is interpersonal hypnotherapy? Utilizing advanced hypnotherapy skills with confusing font here for you. Utilizing advanced hypnotherapy skills to facilitate change within interpersonal relationships and their relationship as found within the subconscious mind. Sorry about that. Now I knew not to use that font. Once again, utilizing advanced hypnotherapy skills. So advanced interpersonal hypnotherapy training in our school happens after 500 hours. Then you go through at least an additional 22 hours to earn that occupational title. So NLP trainings, we were 80 hours. Now we're up to 100 hours. Our school for hypnotherapy is 500 hours. So to be an interpersonal hypnotherapist, it's more advanced than any of that. There are skills to facilitate change within interpersonal relationships. So it will help your relationships in your everyday life. But more importantly, actually, because that gets to the real core. So more importantly, it helps to change the relationships in your subconscious mind. So NLP doesn't really take that deep dive into the subconscious, but it absolutely can. NLP has really good ways to induce trance, and it has some pretty solid techniques to transform the content that comes up. But generally, you don't hear about that as much. But if you study it enough, the techniques are definitely there. The NLP guys clearly learned how to induce trance by modeling Erickson and others, and they clearly learned how to shift around relationships inside. We'll talk about a little bit later, the NLP reparenting technique. And essentially, it's like, okay, you've got a negative inner parent, right? That inner critical voice that doesn't serve you well at all anymore. Never really, maybe did a little, but that voice in your head that's very critical. And we have ways in hypnotherapy to change it, and there are ways in NLP to change it. NLP works with a model called TOTE. Test, operate, test, exit. So test, how do you feel about your mom? Oh, I hate her. Operate, meaning do an exercise, a technique that works to make that better. But then we have to test again. Now, how do you feel about your mom? Well, I hate her less. Okay, not my mom, but you hate your mom less. Okay, so now we can't exit yet. The E in that model is exit. We have to go back and operate again until we can get them to actually say something like, oh, I have compassion for my mom. I love my mom. Interpersonal hypnotherapy essentially says you've got to do that work almost all the time. Because what I learned, here's a brief history of interpersonal hypnotherapy. After doing classical Gilboin style hypnotherapy for years, plus all of my other trainings and education background, which honestly is extensive, my mind started synthesizing all that into something essentially that went beyond it, which every generation needs to do, right? Gilboin would want me to go beyond him. So I honor where that came from, but then really where do we go with that? What I learned essentially through Gil's transforming therapy is a way of regressing to one's childhood. We're not talking past lives here, although we could in a future class. We have a future class coming up going into past life regression, transmigration, and karma or reincarnation, something like that, coming up in a week or two. In Gil's style of training, it was basically just childhood regression. Honestly, Gilboin wasn't a big fan of past life regression, which is another topic. So when you're regressing the childhood, Gilboin talked about an ISE, an initial sensitizing event. He's not the only one who talked about it, but that was a big part of that model. Even though you're almost always looking at a relationship, when you do that regression, right, there's the boy and he's being hurt by his dad, and then the gestalt is between the dad and the boy. You're bringing that to resolution, which is essentially about love. Interpersonal hypnotherapy says that's actually at the root of every problem, essentially. Right, so think about how it works. A person has a symptom or behavior, something bothering them. Now, why would they have, let's talk about some negative behavior, like anger and screaming at your kids. Okay, so we know underneath that behavior is anger, right? So really simple example, behavior, not really healthy. What's underneath it? You're angry. Okay, well, why are you angry? Well, really, the truth is you're afraid if you get underneath your anger. And why are you hurt? Why are you angry and afraid? Because you've been hurt. Okay, so let's go to the root cause of all that, right? Where's this hurt, scared, angry person who yells at children, pathologically yells at children? I guess almost any yelling is pathological towards a child. But anyway, we're going back to the root cause of where all that comes from. And you find out that dad, when he was a boy, but let's say 5 years old, although it was his whole childhood, which is relevant here, his dad was abusive to him, and then this dad became abusive to his child, right? We all can figure that out within a minute if we thought it out, right? Oh, your dad is like that because his dad was like that. Like, brilliant. But you know how often that idea can be overlooked? Because instead of just trying to modify dad's behaviors, why don't we get to the root cause of what's happening in the psyche? So the difference, though, is with classical, at least Gilboinian hypnotherapy, it was looking for the ISE. And the idea is that there's one initial sensitizing event. But what I started realizing over years of doing this work is there's not only one event. You live with that every day of your life. You may have had 18 years plus the in utero stuff. All right, so 18 plus years of being influenced by someone else's, let's say your father's, negativity. So when we do these regressions in interpersonal hypnotherapy, we're focusing on the relationship because that's what it's always coming down to. But then we have to say, well, what's at the root of a disharmonious relationship in the subconscious mind? All right, so take this in, because this is the real clincher for why interpersonal hypnotherapy is what it is. What's happening in the subconscious mind that's causing this problem? Oh, it's a parent-child conflict, right? We already knew that from analytical hypnotherapy and Gilboin's hypnotherapy called transforming therapy. And if you study the work of Dave Ellman, his hypnoanalysis was kind of the same thing. Oh, I see, your dad did this to you. And so that's super obvious for anybody who's looked in the subconscious mind. But now what's happening with interpersonal hypnotherapy, we understand the way to resolve that gestalt, the conflict between the parent and the child, will always require forgiveness. All right, so now let's say this dad that we're talking about has migraines or horribly bad headaches because of all this anger and rage he holds inside. What would interpersonal hypnotherapy say about that? Lack of forgiveness. The headache is a lack of forgiveness. So why are we taking Tylenol? It's okay. I'm not saying you shouldn't take something like that to make the head feel better, right? But why are we taking Tylenol? Well, because we haven't resolved the root cause yet. Why are you getting massage for your headaches? Because you haven't got to the psychological root cause yet. Why are you lashing out on your kids? Well, you haven't done enough behavioral therapy to teach you how to manage your anger. Why are you so angry? If you keep tracing it down, let's say in the chiropractic model, dad has a misaligned spine because he holds so much tension, the spine's all out of alignment. It's causing health problems. So now a chiropractor will put you back in line, but then all that tension pulls you back out again. Massage therapists can massage the tension away, but why does it lock back up again? Because all the tension is actually emotional tension. Not always, but a lot of people, we all know, hold tremendous amounts of emotional tension. What is that emotion? It's coming from the child in your subconscious who has a negative relationship with his or her parents. So what do you have to do to resolve that? You do have to bring that relationship in the subconscious mind back to a state of love and wholeness. Now, how do you do that most effectively? We have a lot of techniques for that, but if you don't bring forgiveness into it, then it never really resolves. So forgiveness actually is the root of interpersonal hypnotherapy. I am a Course in Miracles student and teacher, and anybody who studies the course clearly understands if you're going to do miracles, you've got to do forgiveness. Now, that's why interpersonal hypnotherapy's rapid resolution protocols are like 2 sessions. I will quite often work with a client with a certain issue, and I will do my best anyway to resolve that issue within 2 sessions, because you can apply a certain series of techniques that I've developed over the years that get right to the root cause of that very quickly. Once you understand that, then you can start to model it in others. So that's why I wrote my books and opened the school and all the work we continue to do, because the model absolutely holds true, and it's very solid in and of itself. Now, by bringing NLP into this, we're just enhancing something that's already awesome and continuing to evolve to be better. NLP has this font is horrible, but we'll get through it. The NLP has a series of presuppositions that essentially lay the foundation for what it is, how they choose to see the world. And the presupposition is like, hey, this is probably quite accurate, but we're not saying it's gospel. We're just saying it seems like a beneficial model. as I started synthesizing NLP and interpersonal hypnotherapy, and me always wanting to go deeper into spiritual topics and not out there woo-woo stuff, but the really deep teachings you'll find in yogic philosophy and yogic psychology and Buddhism and Buddhist psychology. You go into that kind of stuff, you're going a lot deeper than classical hypnosis and NLP. So interpersonal NLP also helps us to bring in the transpersonal component of NLP. Our school does train you in transpersonal hypnotherapy. However, beyond the transpersonal is the interpersonal. And just take that in for a moment. Beyond transpersonal, which you think is like as high as it goes, is actually interpersonal. And part of that, if you understand A Course in Miracles, miracles are interpersonal. And forgiveness is the root of a miracle. So what could be deeper than getting forgiveness to occur like that, getting a miracle to occur like that? So there are presuppositions we work with interpersonal NLP that help you to have a framework that you can combine with basic NLP presuppositions to take the work, I would just say, deeper. It offers a way of viewing it that allows, and my students in the last NLP class really were loving the integration of the deeper spiritual components of the work with this. So here's some of those to lead us on. Number one, consciousness is the essence of our being. What I go on to explain in the interpersonal hypnotherapy training is that underneath all these perceptions that you're changing, right, we talk about neuro, the stuff coming in. We talk about linguistic, the stuff you're doing in your mind. But in NLP, we don't really hear much about the consciousness, the formless field of awareness in which all those images and words are playing around. That consciousness is so extremely valuable. And you can do a lot of NLP training, which I have, and they never really even bring up the idea, because that's my background in meditation and yogic philosophy and Buddhist studies and all that. Consciousness is a very important part of who we are. So interpersonal NLP acknowledges that. And again, our students tend to really like that. All right, next, number two, we do not exist in isolation as our minds are joined with other minds. This is, again, a Course in Miracles and many other philosophies presupposition that we are all one. And that if our minds are joined beyond time and space, in this idea of a quantum universe, a non-local reality where one atom can change here and affect another atom on the other side of the universe. I mean, that's technically proven now, right? But now, can that work within the mind? I essentially, in my life, I'm not saying it's scientific proof yet, have proven absolutely that one person heals in my relationship, someone else heals somewhere else. And that leads to other presuppositions here that make this work even more powerful. Number three, changes in one mind affect other minds. Okay, essentially what I'm saying. I've had clients who in my office forgive and heal the guilt they have about a relationship, and then find out when they go home, there's like a voicemail on their answering machine that occurred right in the middle of the session saying, hey, I just thought we should reconnect again. Like the moment this person heals, this one calls that person. It's uncanny how often that happens in our interpersonal hypnotherapy training. I read a case history on that where I went to our Orlando location, helped one of the students there to heal, and then she wrote me this beautiful letter how she went home, her son was a different person. Okay, so it only takes one person to heal a relationship, which is number four. Number five, forgiveness is the means of any true and valuable shift in the mind. NLP works to make shifts. It takes you from a negative perception to a positive perception. That's what A Course in Miracles is all about. But what is that shift? Well, the way NLP thinks, it'll say, all right, well, if another system is really working, let's adapt techniques that help to bring those ways of being into our way of being. And as a Course in Miracles student, I'm like, well, let's apply this NLP way of thinking to the miracle, all right, like a real miracle. And according to Course in Miracles, miracles are mental. For me to get rid of that person's headache, I would need, well, first of all, we always give a disclaimer about working in medical conditions, but we've done that enough already in our school. So assuming you're working within the law, but anyway, to get rid of a symptom, let's just call it a headache for now, we understand that we can't just manipulate the surface. We have to get to that psychological, that mental root cause, which is going to be some form of unforgiveness. So to get the shift to go from here to here, if you understand that idea, then the shifts are going to occur on deeper levels in more profound ways. If it's just, I know you don't like spiders, but let's get a picture of you liking spiders, you didn't necessarily explore the content underneath that structure. So NLP, again, is more structure related. Hypnotherapy is more content related, but combining the two should say, why not look at both? There's only two. It's not like you have 100. We have structure, we have content. Look at structure with NLP, look at content with hypnotherapy, with the NLP helping to fuel that. Number 6, shifts in the mind can move us from wrong perceptions to right perceptions. That shift, again, when it's really occurring in the deepest level, is a miracle. Miracles are rapid. They're not bound by time. So if you're applying miracle-mindedness to hypnotherapy and NLP, now again, we're talking about working miracles. I'm not saying you're walking around as a Christian evangelist. I'm saying in the most refined, and not to put that down in any sense. I'm just saying that's not what we are. If you really refine what do they mean by forgiveness in A Course in Miracles, which is a highly refined Christian theology, you find you're able to perform miracles when you understand what they are. But when you understand how quickly they can occur, it changes everything about the way you work with the client. Okay, 7, from right perception, we can awaken to true knowledge, which is to know who we truly are. NLP doesn't talk about that. It's not really concerned with who you really are, because essentially we don't know anything. NLP doesn't really, there's no religion or spiritual path behind classical NLP. So there's no presupposition that you are a spiritual being. I have that presupposition that we are spiritual beings. So beyond just moving a client to right perception, we could actually move them to true knowledge, to truly being awake. The thing is, as like a Zen practitioner, when you meditate and have no mind, or yogic practitioners know how to get there as well, I practice both, when your mind is empty, you don't have right or wrong perceptions. You don't have perception occurring. That is more aligned with enlightenment than just only positive perceptions. If you study yogic philosophy or Buddhist philosophy or the psychologies that go along with it, we don't just move people to right perception. We have to wake them up to who they truly are. So for instance, if you were a spider hater, but now you're a spider lover, well, now that's just your new ego trip, right? Now you're going to save all the world's spiders, right? That's not who you are. Who you are is a very important question, and that's the stuff I get passionate about. So I couldn't teach NLP with passion while it didn't acknowledge this idea that you're in there. You're a consciousness, you're a soul, you're a spirit, you have love and power and divine guidance and this incredible being that you are. On that notion, bear with me for a sec. I'm going to just show you a little bit of what's happening on the internet now. So here on the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy's YouTube page, I've added a bunch of new recordings some of you might really like and don't know about yet. Basic Introduction to Anahat Meditation System. You can find more about that at onlinemonastery.com. I just put on this Illuminated Mind meditation that's very powerful. It works to open your third eye and awaken your kundalini. It's not for somebody who doesn't want serious spiritual growth, but there it is for the public. Profound stress reduction for inner peace. This honestly is, again, really powerful. We've also put our first 4.5 hours of training online for free. That's what these are. You can watch me do some stage hypnosis and whatnot. Awakening to the Core of Your Soul is also a new one that's out there. And then all of these conscious community classes are now on YouTube. They're also here on our website at Conscious Community Classes. Aside from that, just so you know, we have a Course in Miracles workshop coming up on the 27th, a full day, kind of like a spiritual retreat workshop with me. On the 30th, coming up this weekend, there's still seats available, Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. That relates to the psychologies, the mental models that we're utilizing. And then the Advanced Life Mastery course coming up on July 30th. Just want to let you know about that. All of the teachings here, this is one of my other websites, onlinemonastery.com, are free. There's over 60 hours of recorded training, again, totally free, and then at least 40 hours of meditation time, making it a 100-hour CEU course where you can be a certified Anahat meditation teacher. It's not an easy path. It's advanced stuff, but it's an online monastery. So enjoy it if you like. Again, still totally free and being integrated into our school's curriculum more and more. This is our main website, instituteofhypnotherapy.com, and our upcoming conference, still 5 days for a discount, is called Synthesis. The idea is oneness, equilibrium, and personal wholeness, the power of hypnotherapy and subconscious integration. It's online. Hopefully next year we'll go live in person again, but now we're playing it safe with COVID. But there's going to be wonderful presenters there. Danny Fox, Jan Govan, I'm not going to say everybody's name for time, but some wonderful presenters. I hope you'll join us for sure. It's 3 days, counts as 30 CEU hours. Okay, with those announcements, let's get back to our presuppositions, and then let's get towards a meditation, and then question answer. Okay, next. So 8, awakening to truth beyond perceptions brings true peace and harmony. Right? NLP works with your perceptions. It's not really meant to take you beyond your perceptions. I have heard people use the term meta NLP. The word meta refers to that which is overarching or higher, a higher perspective. But the founders of NLP didn't necessarily go there. I feel like if I don't go there, I'm missing something too important that I've studied in other traditions. Number 9, there's truth and there is illusion, and the choice is ours. So NLP says all choice is better than no choice. Right? Choice is empowering and choice is a good thing. But what are we choosing between? NLP essentially would say one perception and another, because that's all there is. You can have a right perception, a wrong perception, a healthy one, an unhealthy one. But again, as a Zen practitioner, for instance, if you look at Rene Descartes, who said, I think, therefore I am, right? Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. Well, Zen master says, but what happens when you stop thinking? Do you cease to exist? In Zen, you kind of might say yes. In Buddhism, it's called anatman, no individual self. But that's not the only model that spiritual traditions pull from. In yogic philosophy, your core self, which actually is there in Buddhism too, is pure bliss, is pure love, is pure joy. Your Buddha nature is amazing, right? Your true nature in Hinduism or yogic practice is amazing. Most traditions, even the Western ones, if you get down to it, say God created you as good, right? You were created good. I acknowledge that that inner being is there, and it doesn't need to have healthy perspectives. Its true beingness is enough. Like in Zen practice, there is morality and there are precepts you take to encourage high moral standards. But when you're just practicing really good meditation, you're going to be a good person because you're just clear and your true nature is love. So you don't hurt people. Buddhists don't walk around killing people, right? So the precept, do not kill, is very natural for someone who is clear. You could align your perceptions for high morality, but if you go beyond those perceptions, your true nature, at least from these presuppositions, is inherently good. Number 10, we are not victims of our minds. We can heal our minds, heal our relationships, and heal our world. Now, NLP wouldn't be against that. It's just something I want to have in our presuppositions to say, you're not a victim of the world you see. You're inventing the world you see. That is a Course in Miracles presupposition. I'm not the victim of the world I see. I'm inventing the world I see. If there's any truth to that, right, then we absolutely want to be empowered to heal our minds, to change our entire life experience. All right, so let's just talk briefly about some of these NLP concepts, not all at all, that blend so well with hypnotherapy. Some examples, yet far from the whole list, are eye-accessing cues. There's a lot to be said about that in NLP, but essentially, if somebody looks up, they're being more visual. If they're level with their eyes, they're more auditory. If they look down, they're being more kinesthetic. There's a lot more to that, but now imagine being a hypnotherapist and you're guiding a person on a guided imagery journey to a special place where they're supposed to picture things, and then they say, I'm not visual. I couldn't see anything you said. An NLP practitioner would not have made that mistake. They would know, look for the eye-accessing cues, listen for the predicates that they're using, so we can look, we can listen, we can even feel. We can know, what is the client's preferred working style? Oh, they're more auditory. I better use more auditory words, more language patterns that invoke sound instead of imagery. That's only one example of how to utilize that. But again, how do we combine it? Rapport building skills. Hypnotherapy trainings are going to have some level of that, but I've had psychotherapists, social workers, mental health counselors go through our training and say, Matthew, your rapport building training was more elaborate than anything I went through in my other trainings. And because I'm pulling from NLP. So the rapport building skills are very powerful. If you don't have rapport, you can't hypnotize somebody well. So knowing how to build rapport quickly and really effectively and to test that you have it is not necessarily a classical hypnosis skill. Like Freud didn't have it. If he had NLP, maybe we'd have a different world now of whatever. Anchors and triggers. When we want to return to a desired state in hypnosis, we have what's called a post-hypnotic suggestion. Anytime I pull my ear and say, Frankfurter, you fall into hypnosis. Essentially, the pulling of the ear is an anchor, and the phrase that I could use a certain word, Frankfurter, and that will cause a certain response. It's a Pavlovian conditioned response. NLP has learned to utilize that in, dozens of very effective techniques to make change really quickly. NLP is another example, another way of working called pacing and leading. Essentially, what that skill set does is it steps into rapport with somebody, but first it calibrates a person and it sees where they're at, observes them very carefully with refined observational skills, and then paces their reality with the intention to lead them. Where are we leading people? Ideally just to their goals. But sometimes they don't even know their own best interests. So they could be happier than they realize. They could make more money than they realize. So I will quite often see my client better than they see themselves and guide them to goals that they maybe couldn't even grasp yet. But really, you've got to be there within the person's model and help them to achieve what they want to achieve. But you can help them through NLP skills to realize, like you could say, well, why do you want that? Why do you want that? Okay, well, why do you want a new car? Okay, well, why do you want the new Ferrari? Okay, why does it have to be red? What do you really want? Oh, you want love. I see. Okay, we'll get you the car, but let's help you to get what you really want. That leads to one of the other bullet points there, core transformation. Two meaning there's two essential questions we could ask in core transformation. One, which you could use for yourselves now. What would feel even better, right? If you're making love with your partner, what would feel even better? What a great question, right? You just had a great day with your kids. They won the soccer game. That's awesome. What would feel even better? It's such a wonderful metaphor for life. The other question in core transformation is, what is your highest intention? Honey, I see you screaming at me. What is your highest intention? You have to be careful how you use that, but realize like, well, why is your spouse yelling at you? What is your highest intention? I need to be heard. Okay, I hear you. All right, I'm listening. I'll give you what you need. Okay, what else do you need? What's right? Again, I'm not saying that's the exact way to speak to someone, but that question can be utilized in hypnotherapy and outside of it to say what would be even better, or what is your highest intention? The other bullet point I skipped over, modeling. This is where I talked about it before. We have a technique to say, okay, somebody is great at, let's say, public speaking. All right, what are they doing internally that makes them so good? And then we'll use techniques to get our internal structure to be like their internal structure. Reparenting, there are techniques in NLP that sometimes I'm in a hypnotic regression and that inner parent is just not helping, not healthy, not beneficial. And we can change that using a simple NLP reparenting technique. Sometimes that's what works. The fast phobia cure. Here we have a technique that if you know the root cause of a problem, let's say they were bit by a spider, and that's why I have that phobia, we can just play that movie backwards in the fast phobia cure and work to desensitize the charge in the initial sensitizing event. And it's quite effective. Not always the solution, but great in your bag of tricks. Again, these are just examples of a huge field of study that will make hypnotherapy so much better. Language patterns. We have in our master NLP training manual over 50 NLP language patterns. I think I have them in our schools training as well. But either way, 50 language patterns that you can start utilizing with your clients. An example would be and. So, and as you're relaxing deeper, and as you're noticing your legs relaxing, and as you're noticing your back relaxing. It's simple. But what we're doing is pacing them. And if you pace them, you'll see below it says verbal and nonverbal pacing and leading. If I can pace their experience, I can then lead them like we've been talking about. And these language patterns can be used in a lot of creative ways, and one is definitely creative pacing and leading. Trance words. NLP, studying how people do things really well, said, okay, when somebody's inducing trance well, what words do they use? And then they just dissected those words and gave us those lists, right? So knowing if I use the word sleep, right, it has a certain effect. That's been studied. And there's lots of other good words. Another one would be easy, right? Why not put the idea of easy into the work? Another great word there is automatic, right? Why can't your subconscious mind automatically keep you comfortable or keep you in better states of health? Using these simple words you may never have thought of can change your hypnotic programming significantly. Presuppositions. Again, NLP has their list, and interpersonal NLP, we now have our list, and they don't conflict. They combine really well. But anyway, having a structure for thinking by people who have come before you in the field can really help you to find your own style. Verbal and nonverbal pacing and leading. There are techniques that I just alluded to that can guide people, but beyond just what they're seeing internally, what they're hearing, what they're feeling, kind of pacing that and then shifting them into altered states by simply, if somebody, let's say, is in a negative kinesthetic, they feel bad, we can pace them into a positive visual, right? Feeling bad is a way of being, but a shift from negative kinesthetic is to positive visual. NLP definitely ways to do that, just with language patterns, not even having to induce trance. Some modality distinctions. Within people's communications, they have what are called representational systems, right? Visual, auditory, kinesthetic is the primary ones. A submodality distinction is to break that down. So we would say, okay, within the visual sphere, we have near and far. We have left and right. We have big and small. We have black and white in color. Those are examples of submodality distinctions. The more you can chunk down, which is an NLP term, you're able to look at the structure of language more and the way people create that structure in their mind. Oh, I see. If you have a picture of a spider very big in front of you and it's full color and it has loud sounds of, right, of course that's scary. But why can't we move it further away, shrink it down, move it off to the side, make it black and white, and then turn down the volume? And the person's going to feel better. And so it's an example of understanding a submodality and then how to actually utilize it. The NLP Meta Model, while complex and takes time to study, is so extremely valuable in understanding how you communicate, how others communicate, and catching people on what NLP calls Metamodel Violations. Here's an example, and you could play with this with your family and friends. There's something called lack of referential index. It's one of the Metamodel Violations. And you could use it actually when you understand the Milton Model in the reverse. But so the Milton Model essentially is kind of the reverse of the Meta Model. You have to go through master NLP training to understand that. And you have to go through basic NLP training first to understand the Meta Model. Once you understand the Meta Model, you work with it for like 6 months, then come back to our master NLP training, and you'll understand the Milton Model better. So the Meta Model, one example of that is a lack of referential index violation. So that would be something like, hey, honey, I think we should go do that tomorrow. What does the significant other need to say in that moment? What's missing in that statement? It's a very obvious one. Do what tomorrow? I think we should do that tomorrow. People speak with lack of referential index frequently, and they expect the listener to know what they're talking about, right? I don't like it when you do that to me. The violation, it's a strong word. And what we do with the violation is we challenge it, which is also a strong word. So there's gentler ways to say that. Your spouse left something out instead of saying a violation, right? You violated the rules of language. No, you left something out, right? You could say that to them. I'm sorry, what do you want to do tomorrow? Right? You can say it in the most loving, kind, compassionate way, the most tactful and skillful way. But essentially, something's missing. So we challenge the lack of referential index and just say, what specifically? Who specifically? When specifically? Where specifically? By asking people to be more specific, we don't make assumptions, and we get to help them to be understood, which really everybody wants when it comes down to it. All right, so we're wrapping it up. We're going to go into a meditation now called Healing States of the Masters. I'll explain it, and then afterwards I'll be available for question and answer. Again, have questions ready if you like, so you can just put them in the chat pod at that time. I'll leave this slide up while we're going in. Next online interpersonal hypnotherapy training begins now because you start recordings and then you attend the practical hours later. It's just like our hypnotherapy school, 70% online, 30% done. This is done online as well. The practical hours are done online. So it's 2 days of practicals, 35 hours before that. It's a total of 50 hours for the basic NLP training. So you can start anytime. It can take as long as you want to go through the videos. And then you go through the online practical hours when you are ready to attend those. But you start with the online videos first from previous classes. Makes it easier for everybody. You can learn more at instituteofhypnotherapy.com. So the healing states of the Masters meditation, I write about it in my book, Interpersonal Hypnotherapy. I utilize it frequently to help people to grasp what is the essence of interpersonal hypnotherapy. The idea, you're going to want to come up with a role model for this meditation, and that could be like Buddha or Christ or Kuan Yin or anybody, an angel or a saint. You could use anyone. You could say, your best friend, or someone you really love. But this is somebody who can see humanity the way somebody like Christ or Buddha would see humanity, right? If you could imagine the most perfect love, the most unbelievable compassion, the most unconditional accepting and allowing, somebody who's totally at peace no matter what's going on. Right? This was my major in college, studying the great saints and sages. They're the best role models. Again, NLP models behavior, models internal structure of people who are doing things well. I don't know anybody doing anything much better than Buddha. Right? If you really study, if you don't know much about why Buddha is Buddha, he did something very significant with his mind. I'm not saying Christ didn't, but Buddha was there 2,500 years before, and he left his own lineage of how to work with your mind. And Buddhists essentially are working to be more like Buddha. So I invite you to pick your role model here as we go into the meditation. And then afterwards, I'll talk briefly about the different stages of the meditation and how I've evolved it to help you to understand what it means to be an interpersonal hypnotherapist in this world, or what it really means to be a bodhisattva in this world. In the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, a bodhisattva, and I've given classes on this, you can check it out on YouTube, Matthew Brownstein, Interpersonal Hypnotherapy and the Bodhisattva Vow. It's a vow that Buddhists take that says sentient beings are numberless, not just humans, but plants and animals, anybody that feels, and I vow to save them all. It's impossible, but that's the Buddha way, right? That's why you do it. They're suffering, and I'm going to work to relieve suffering. This meditation will help you to embody that sense of unconditional love and compassion for humanity. Doesn't mean you have to tolerate the stuff that you don't want directly in your life, but your general feeling for the situation of humanity is one of compassion and inner peace and love. Like, how would a great saint or sage or Buddha or bodhisattva walk on this earth? But the bodhisattvic vow is a vow to be of service to others. And this meditation embodies that. When you come back down from the metaphorical top of the mountain, you are, as the Buddhists call it, entering the marketplace with helping hands. Those of you who feel you have a dharma or a purpose and a mission, and you feel like you're not quite doing that yet, well, when would now be a good time to start? Listen to the language pattern. When would now be a good time to start? There's nothing more fulfilling than doing your dharma, your mission, and your purpose. So I highly encourage you, as you're doing this meditation, to make it really real and significant. Realize it's no small thing to step up to the plate and work to heal the world. Okay, with that said, let's change our screen image a little. Welcome you to close your eyes. I'll close my eyes as well. It only takes about 10 minutes, and then we'll be here for Q&A. So yeah, feel free to close your eyes down. Take a breath. We're not going to use much formal hypnosis here. Yet let's do it a little bit NLP style. You might remember what it's like when you've been very deeply relaxed. Those of you who have been in hypnosis before might choose to go into a trance by just remembering the trance state. What does hypnosis feel like to you? How would you know when you're in a hypnotic state? Does your body relax first? Or does your mind relax first? It's got to be one or the other. That's called the double bind. Is it your body relaxing first? Or your mind relaxing first? When I ask you to think about a trance state, that's called a trans-derivational search, causing you to look inside yourself to say, are you relaxed now? How do you know when you have profound physical and mental relaxation? Do you notice your body melting into the surface below you? I'm sure you could feel what you're sitting on. I'm sure you could feel what your back is touching, your arms are touching, and your legs are touching. Yet do you notice that by bringing attention to your body, that just causes it to relax even more? Perhaps you'll observe your breath. Notice when you're breathing in. Notice when you're breathing out. Is the inhalation longer than the exhalation? Is the exhalation longer than the inhalation, or is it rhythmic and causing you to go deeper now with every breath that you breathe? And I wonder what else you might be hearing now. My voice, perhaps any sounds in your room. Just listen. Notice how when you listen, your attention goes into the present moment. And notice how you can go deeper inside yourself when you ask, who's hearing? Who's listening? Who's behind your closed eyes? What happens when you go to the place behind your closed eyes? Or between your ears? Or in the present moment now with every breath? Do you notice your heart relaxing and your shoulders softening? Or did you just do that when I mentioned it? Either way, I'm sure you know how to relax your body even more now. You never know what someone will do to go deeper within. Yet everybody finds that way by simply wondering, what does deeper even mean? Is it more quiet inside? Is it more present? Do you find yourself turning within, looking toward your own consciousness? However, everybody has the ability to imagine things in some way, so imagine, think about, sense or feel in your own way that you find yourself in a field, in a valley, surrounded by mountains. Imagine you're in this beautiful meadow, green grass all around, the sky overhead. Make it panoramic so that it's not just something you observe, you're in it, looking above you. See those mountain peaks. Are they snow-capped? Is there a tree line where the trees don't even make it that high anymore? Are there clouds, or is the sky completely blue? Where's the position of the sun? Smell the air. Imagine breathing in fresh, crisp, cool mountain air. Feeling your feet solid on the earth. You might even look down and notice what you're wearing, just to help you to associate that much more in the imagery. Might hear the sound of a stream, or sense the wind blowing across your face. And as you look around in this place, I'd like you to notice you're not alone now. Others start to gather here too, because you're on the planet with other people, so there's other humans. As other people start to enter this vision, notice there's some people you might know, others you don't know. All different skin colors, genders, sexualities, races. Some people you consider moral, others not so much. Some people really wonderful, others quite confused and disturbing. Just look around and observe humanity, but I'd like you to really be yourself, the way you normally would be with these people. Just sense step 1 of your meditation. I'm standing in a valley, looking at others. Notice some people are suffering, they're sick, there's homeless, and then there's some people who are very healthy in beautiful homes. And you're just observing. Now imagine that you look up towards the top of one of those mountain peaks. As you look up, you'll see your role model, that wonderful figure, whoever you decided that is. Your role model is sending love and light down into all of humanity, including you. Imagine their palms are outstretched and light just pours down upon everyone. You're wise enough to turn and face towards that and to receive that light. So imagine looking up towards the light of someone who's so wonderful in your eyes, and that person is just showering you with love and compassion and peace and grace and goodness. Just like blessings pouring down on everyone, but you're just focused on you and your connection to your role model up there now. Now imagine as if you float up out of your body, up those rays of light, up to the top of the mountain. Enjoy the journey, ascending up, flying up, until you stand next to your role model. Your role model welcomes you to be there. And while that being continues to send love and light down at everyone, take your next major perspective shift and look down at everyone from the top of the mountain. Look down and see the people in the valley, the healthy and the sick ones, the rich and the poor ones, all the different colored ones, all this variety. What is it like now when you observe through your eyes? And feel through your heart when you see everyone down there. But now I'd like you to imagine your next perspective. Step inside of your role model and look through their eyes. Feel through their heart. Imagine, what does it mean to be such a being like this? Imagine perhaps the light is channeling through them. There's just nobody even home. There's just empty, and all this love and light pours through this channel. I don't know what you'll notice, but hear what they might think. What are their thoughts like? What is their heart like? How do they see everyone down there? Why are they your role model? Enjoy this state of being and the high vibration that goes with it. I'm sure you'll sense more love, more compassion, more peace, more giving, forgiving, being to exist, to give, to bless. Now, for your next perspective, imagine floating down those rays of light, back down into the valley, as this being. Imagine standing there with all those other people, but now imagine looking through the eyes of enlightened love. Feel through your heart when you're walking the earth, but now just like your role model would. How would that change your relationship with others? How would that motivate your career? How would that encourage you to finish projects that you've always known you should do, but have been putting off, that could benefit others? Take your time to imagine being that being on this earth, living from that space, interacting with others. Now for the final perspective shift, take a breath and bring it right here now. Don't visualize it, just be it. Just sit here now, taking a breath, heart open, mind clear, being the light of the world, being love, being peace, being calm, being present, being confident, being free. Right? NLP helps us to model others, and what better people to model than the world's great saints and sages and enlightened beings? And we're all asked to be that right now. So take an easy breath, take that feeling, rush it from your toes to your head, rush it from your head back down through your body. Again, breathe it up from toes to head. Breathe it down from head to toes. Take your time to transition. Come out of this altered state any way you want. Sometimes it's nice to rub your palms together and then massage your face. Or I'll simply be counting from 1 to 5 to help you to transition back. And then I invite you to ask your questions or share anything you like using the chat pod, the comments, however you do that, wherever you're streaming. Number 1, coming back more and more to this moment. As I count from 1 to 5, it brings you fully back here now if you're not already. 2, transitioning towards getting ready to open your eyes. 3, you have full memory of everything we just did. You can return to these states anytime you wish. And 1, 2, 3, 4 when you're ready. And 5, eyes open. Back fully here now, wide awake and back here full and regular, yet hopefully more clear, more loving, more compassionate, waking consciousness. All right, so quick review of that, and then feel free to put questions in the chat pod while I'm speaking now. And if there aren't any, we'll wrap it up because we're recording. But I'm really happy to interact with you guys if you want to ask questions or share anything. So stage 1 in that meditation, you're looking at humanity as a normal person, all right? And that's going to mean you have your defenses and your fear and your insecurity and all that stuff. We're not necessarily the most useful when we're caught up in our personal ego. But then you look up towards the being up there and you realize, wow, there's a much greater way to be, and at least I can get blessings from somebody like that, right? So that's step 2, is just turn towards something higher. And usually there's a role model for that, something higher. But then the idea is you ascend up to the top of the mountain. Your next perspective is to look at humanity through your eyes when you're not inside of an enlightened consciousness, but it's a lot better when you're on the top of the mountain looking down because you're not caught up in the stuff anymore. You can usually be more at least sympathetic or empathetic, but ideally compassionate to everybody down there. And then when you step inside of your role model, I hope you can really sense the difference perhaps between how most of us are and the way how a Christ or a Buddha might be. Right? That my experience of a being like that is there's no one home. It's just pure love. It's just pure light. Whatever's left of the personality is so aligned with source that it's not much different than source. Swami Baba Muktananda, he said, the purified mind is like unto God. Right? The purified mind is like unto God. So having studied these beings who have minds like this, like what a beautiful role model to step into. It's like a Christ or a Buddha at the top of the mountain. But then the Bodhisattva vow is to say, I'm not just going to stay up there, especially because you have a body, you got to come down anyway, right? You're going to come back down, but then visualize yourself or with other people being that being. From there, we integrate it back right into the here and now and say, okay, now that's you sitting in front of your computer. What are you going to do? Right? You have a mission, you have a purpose, you have something you want to do. Tomorrow, our next hypnotherapy, our April class training starts. I'll be honored to start you guys and take you through with our staff. And again, there's still seats available. And anytime you can technically start anytime with our training. But I'm looking forward to starting with the new group. If some of you are new to all this, I hope that got you excited if you're new to all this about what is hypnotherapy, what is NLP, and how can we utilize it in deeper spiritual principles is really what we're all about. It's not for everybody, but you don't necessarily find this in a university. And a lot of hypnotherapy trainings don't necessarily go there either. So honored, grateful to be here with you guys. All right. This way of being doesn't elicit a lot of question answer when we're just streaming on these social media channels, but feel free at any time to email me questions, put them in the comments box of the videos. And then if you're watching this as a video or afterwards, please like and subscribe because we're working to get the message out. And that's what YouTubers are supposed to say. Like and subscribe and share this with your friends. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you. I don't see any questions, so we're going to log off. We will be here next Monday night, another hour and a half or so class with meditation. I forget what it is now, but you can check out that title on our website, instituteofhypnotherapy.com. Also remember to check out onlinemonastery.com. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate everybody who's here who did say your thanks in the chat pod. And I will look forward to seeing you next week or maybe tomorrow with live class starting for hypnotherapy training. Good night, all.